The calculation tests provide a quick way to search for possible cells with errors. It enables you to run 25 tests on each cell and provides a comprehensive report, and it works exceptionally well, especially in conjunction with the maps. With the maps, you can take a spreadsheet that looks like this and turn it into a map that looks like this. It's then possible to look through and find the areas that look a bit different and investigate them. But as you'll see, there are a number of unique formulas that you would not have investigated. Because this spreadsheet is small, this is not very time consuming. But what happens if the map you generate looks like this? In this case, it would be useful that after looking at the map, you would be advised which cells to look at first, or which exhibit the most likely chance of having an error. This is catered for in Spreadsheet Professional by the calculation tests. And just to see what tests are run, we can go to the options and look at the test options, and these are all the tests that can be run. We will be going through all these tests later in detail, but for now, let's see what type of reports Spreadsheet Professional generates using these tests. So we're going to just close this down quickly and go back to our example spreadsheet and now run these calculation tests on this spreadsheet. To activate the calculation tests, you go to Test, Spreadsheet Test Reports Tool, and you'll see now that automatically ticked is General Tests and Calculation Tests. I've already shown you how to use the maps. We'll leave that off for now. Again, you can choose whether to run it on all the sheets, on only selected sheets, or the selected area. We're going to use the selected sheets. And when I click OK, it runs through and generates a report. Another way to run these same reports would be to click on Document, Spreadsheet Documenter, and here you have the same box where again you can choose the area and the reports to run. Now let's see what reports have been generated. You'll see it generates a separate workbook with a couple of tabs. Here we have general tests, and you'll see that in this spreadsheet no general test errors have been discovered. For every sheet you test, it will also generate an error report with the sheet name. So if we go there, what we'll see is it gives us some summary statistics. So it'll tell you the range analyzed, that's the cells it looked at, how many numbers it found, how many formulas it found, how many labels it found. It also provides a potential error summary, which is a list of the tests it ran where potentially an error existed, and it tells you how many times that has occurred. And then it gives you the actual detail of the tests. So if we just show these a little bit more, it gives you the test condition. It then will explain why potentially that's a problem and what you should be looking out for, and then it will list all the cells that exhibit that characteristic. Before we continue to understand what these tests are doing and what they are telling you, try and run one of these tests for yourself. Now let's review this spreadsheet using the results of the calculations tests to see if we can find any more errors. To make it easier to view, we'll show the spreadsheet here. We have already run the report and we'll show it in this small screen. And we have shown the maps as well, just to get a good view of what we have and haven't looked at while we go through all these reports. Before we begin, let's have a look at the report that was generated. As you'll see, there's a bit of a summary. We have some error conditions identified, so you'll see it's found a few unused input values, some unused calculations, forward column references, lots of numeric rules, and an issue with the dependence rule, and then it's provided us with some detail. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through these conditions and see what it can tell us about the spreadsheet, all the time keeping in mind what the map is telling us. So the first issue we have is unused input values shown in J9 and J10. So let's look at J9 first. If we go to J9 and we use the auditing toolbar, you'll see it tells you that there's no other formula relying on that cell. One of the best ways to see what should be relying on it is to go to the cell next door and do the same thing. Click on Trace Dependence, and you'll see it tells us there's two cells relying on it. So firstly, let's look at this cell. We'll see what it's doing. So this is the cost of sales, and you'll see it's taking the total revenue and multiplying it by the GP percentage. So that's fine, looks okay. If we go to the next cell, for some reason this one is using the total revenue but going 1 year back to use the GP percentage, hence this cell is not being used. So this does look like a potential problem. We're just going to color it to indicate that there might be a problem here, and at the same time on our map we want to show that potentially there is a problem in this cell here. Looking at the next unused input value in J10, we can use the same process. So we'll click on J10 and see what is depending on it, and we'll see that it doesn't exist. We can go next door now and again see what depends on that cell, and you'll see it tells us that this cell here makes use of that cell. So we'll click in there and just see what it uses. Now already this seems to be a problem, because what it's got is it's looking in year 4 for the percentage and the total revenue, but using the operating expenses for year 5. So we're going to immediately mark that, and similarly mark it on the maps. And then to see why this one's not being used, we click here and you discover that there's no formula here, it is hard coded. So that looks like a problem as well. So we'll click there and on the maps here. Moving on to the next section, we now see that the tests have identified some unused calculations in cells F23 to J23. So if we go here and look, F23 appears to be the very last row in our spreadsheet, and it's telling us that this calculation is not used anywhere else. In this case, because we know that this is the final answer, we expect that this will not be used anywhere else, and so we are happy that this entire row should not be used, and we are happy about what is in that particular row. So we'll just go to the map and just identify that we have looked at that part of the spreadsheet. The next item identified refers to forward column references, and it tells us that R20 exhibits a forward column reference. So if we go here and we go to R20, we are told that the cell seems to be referring ahead of itself. Now we've already identified this particular issue and we've noted it, so it seems like the two different tests have identified the same potential error, which just gives us comfort that we will be able to find the errors. The next section refers to the numeric rule, and it's identified a number of cells that have a number within the formula. So just working through these, cells G13 to J14. So if we go to G13 all the way to J14, it is indicating that there's some sort of number in it. And if you look at the formula, you'll see what it's doing is taking the prior year selling price and multiplying it by 1 plus the percentage. So the first question is, are we happy with that formula? The numeric identified is this 1, which in this case appears to be appropriate. So we are happy that that is correct. And we can use the maps in a good way here, because now we know that G13 we are happy with. So if we come here and we look at G13, we can see that it's been copied 1 across, so that seems reasonable. So we're happy with those two. And then we can look and say, well, something's clearly happened with I13. We go to I13, and we discover that it's no longer using the 5%, but the 7%. It is not an issue because of the numeric rule identified. However, by working through this process, we have identified it. So I'm just going to note it. Put here that we've looked at it. And then we can complete this row. And we'll see it goes back to the original format where the 1 plus is the 5%. So we can just mark off this cell as looked at. And just clear these auditing toolbars. We also know that it has mentioned that this row over here also has numeric rules. So we can look, and in a similar way it looks at the prior period and uses the 5% with the 1. And look at the map for row 14. We'll see that this one also exhibits some changes, so we need to be careful here. So that one looks fine. That one looks fine. That one looks fine. And that one looks fine. So we seem to be happy with those cells.